Hello, this is a Private Investigator Experience podcast, and I'm your host, Phil Little. On this channel, we talk about the life and cases of a private investigator, and then I also look at situations that are going on across the United States and out around the world that could affect us here at home in our own communities. And these situations revolve around violence, terrorism, hostage taking, anti-Semitism, the kind of things that feed down to affect our security where we live and work. I've been looking at situations that affect us here at home, and I'm remembering back from the 60s, 70s, 50s, probably goes back to that the Soviet Union and the United States were standoff with each other, and called the Cold War. Many of you young people don't remember that, but Khrushchev, who was the leader of Russia during those many years, and said the only way they could take over the United States was to take them over from within. And two things needed to happen. One, they needed to take guns away from the citizens because with an armed populace like the United States has, they would never be able to do that. And that backs up why the founding fathers did it. If you look at the Constitution, you find that the Second Amendment was put in not because of sporting or hunting, but in the Constitution, the founders said the Second Amendment was to make sure the citizens could protect themselves from an overreaching government. So that was why it was there. Then the second thing that Khrushchev said, we need to replace their education system. And he knew that within a generation, if they took the schooling of our young people at kindergarten age and was able to infiltrate socialist viewpoint, tear down capitalism, tear down the history of America to a group of young people coming and paint America as being bigots and racist and slave owners, as the founders were many times portrayed. And then within one generation, they could have a group that would support them as they would try to take over. Well, we've seen many of those things happen. And we've had this thing happen right under our noses. We've been asleep at the wheel. It's been on our watch, friends, that we've allowed the destruction of God from our society, God from schools, education system to be hijacked by those socialists and moralists, or lack of God or lack of any sort of morality, and to try to take our young people from kindergarten and corrupt their image of America, corrupt their view of God, where that God wasn't even part of society, and to bring down this gender confusion, create chaos in the streets so that those in power can rise up and use force to stamp it out. And then they would be able to take over, and those that supported them, thinking they were going to help them have a better society, would become their slaves like everyone else. We're busy. We're trying to make a living, trying to make a better life for our children. And we've lost touch. We've taken our eye off of the problem and what was going on, thinking, oh, we're Americans. We've got freedom. We'll always have it. It's just us. And the problem is they've taken away the freedoms in such little bites that you don't even notice it. That's like when taking God out of society, schools, prayer out of schools. It was okay. We'll just pray in church. And on it goes. And then you can't have God in the marketplace. And then you don't need 10 commandments in the courthouses or in school. And then, of course, women ought to have the rights to kill their babies if they want to. That's not a political issue, folks. Abortion is a spiritual issue. And when we look in the Bible, time after time throughout the Bible, and I don't have time to go into it, and it's not what I'm talking about here, but the Bible makes it very clear when birth is started, when human life is formed. And the Bible says it's before you were in the womb. God formed you and had a plan and a purpose for your life. And he knew your name. Anyway, that's for another time. I wanted to look at our education system. I remember when I grew up in the Midwest on a farm in Missouri, I went to a one-room schoolhouse. And my first, I think, 3 years, it was one near the farm, about a mile and a half from the farm that I lived in, 9 miles out of town. And we had cold winters then. And I had the stories that my kids loved growing up that we had so much snow and ice there in the wintertime. Snow would be up to the fence post for months at a time. And the roads would be just icy. So you couldn't drive on them. And they had hills, up and down hills going to the school from a farm ranch. And we run both cattle as well as crops. And our dad would walk us to school. And I mean, climbing up the grader ditch because you couldn't walk up the road. It was just an ice skating rink. That's the kind of school I grew up in. We taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. And my last few years of grade school was spent in another one-room schoolhouse that we moved to another location. So I'm pretty basic on education. And what I want, we didn't have a lot about language, or I think we had French in our high school. We didn't have Spanish. We didn't have, and there was really no push to, I think, a foreign language. So a lot has changed. We have hijacking of our education system where they're trying to bring confusion down, not just in colleges, but it's down to high school, elementary schools, into kindergarten. Things like gender confusion. President Trump made it very clear, and it's what the Bible says, which I happen to believe God over anybody else, that God made man and woman. He didn't make 20, 30, or 40 genders. There's two. Either a man or woman. You get assigned at birth, and that's what it is. But there's a confusion, and then all the explicit sexual things in kindergartens. And folks, we in our local schools have been on the sidelines, been quiet, been busy, a few parents working jobs, and just too busy to get involved. And we've seen this now. Fortunately, there are people across America that are rising up. They're recalling school boards that are promoting this, and we're to get righteous people on the school boards. But there's a long way to go. There's a lot to be done in our local communities. And I've been following a college, Hillsdale College, for some time, as well as a man named Victor Davis Hanson. And if you're on the conservative side, you probably have heard about him, I hope. And if you haven't, Google him or go to victordavishanson.com and you will find this is a man that's a student of history. He's mild mannered. He talks in a normal voice. He doesn't shout or get in people's faces. Know when you listen to him, this guy knows what he's talking about. And it rings true because he has the facts and he presents it in a way that we can understand. And I was impressed. And I think this points to the problem that we have today in our education system. And that's the lack and the tearing down of the moral compass on our young people involving our personal integrity. We have lost the teaching of that. We have lost the moral compass that helps guide. We all are sinners. There's none righteous, no one. The Bible talks about, we're just not bad people when we're born. We're spiritually dead people. And the only way we can come to life and have really a whole fulfilling life is to accept God's plan for our life and the provision he made in Jesus coming to earth and living and dying. There is a plan that God has for us, and we need to get back to having personal ethics that are taught, morality that is taught, starting in the kindergarten, at home. It should be taught in the home first, not just in our schools. We can't leave it up to our schools to educate our children. We found how that worked. It worked too well. But I was reading the commencement address by Victor David Hanson to Hillsdale College in May of 2025. That was this year, just a few weeks ago. And I was impressed. And he lays out what our issues are and what Hillsdale is doing and what the future should be. I'm just going to share little excerpts of it. I hope you will go to victordavishanson.com, or you can go to Hillsdale College and you can find the commencement address there. But this man, just a little bit about him if you don't know, he is a distinguished fellow in history at Hillsdale College, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, a professor of classic emeritus at California State University, Fresno, and a nationally syndicated columnist. And he's written many books on the subject of history and what is going on in the world. Books like A War Like No Other, How the Athenians and Spartans Fought the War, the Second World War, how the first global conflict was fought and won, on and on. This man's got his credentials, and just listen to him. Don't take my word for it. Check him out. Now, he had three points that he made, and he was talking about Hillsdale College and what they've accomplished. It's a message for the nation, every other university. He was talking about that the focus has been on Hillsdale a lot by the record they have and what they've been doing. And I'm quoting this from his statement right now, Victor Davis Hanson. He says another reason for the attention being given Hillsdale is that the Department of Education is seeking to restore civic and classical education, and they're looking at Hillsdale College for direction. If in the past Hillsdale was a sanctuary of all that remains of good in the largely lost and aimless landscape of American higher education, today it is more the nation's guide to the rediscovery, now listen to this, of personal integrity. It's and also he says gratitude to the old breed that came before. Now, what has happened in our education system? Destroying the past, tearing down the founders and those that have come before us, and saying we're smarter, we're wiser. You don't need God. You don't need these. This Constitution is out of date now. Let's rewrite it, tear it up. Have you realized how deep that is in our country? And he goes on to say, I quote, in other words, Hillsdale College has become the nation's 21st century example of what higher education should be and might still come. You know, I'm an optimist at heart. For the last 4 years, my optimism has faded a lot. But now, since November the 4th and what's happened in our country in the last six months, we have seen a resurgence of common sense, of morality, of bringing God back into our society and country, and, and tearing down these idols and evil things such as CRT and DEI and the woke philosophy that has just penetrated our whole lives. And he says, I quote again, today I would like to reflect on three sometimes forgotten American virtues: honor, tradition, and optimism. And I just challenge you. There's so much here. I'm not going to cover it all. I hope you will look at this. Now, he talked about one of the things he did when he first day he got to the campus, and apparently he was riding a bicycle around and he parked it in one of the bike stands and he forgot about it. And he realized that when he got to his sleeping quarters. And so he said, well, it'll be gone tomorrow. But when he back the next day, it was still there. Unbelievable, he said. And then when he went to the library looking for books, he found that as he scanned the shelves, he was equally stunned. There were no therapeutic courses like peace studies, environmental studies, gender studies, film studies, ethnic studies, gender studies, or sexual studies. Instead, there were courses in all of the classical aspects of philosophy, literature, language, history, mathematics, and science. And there's more to that. I hope you check it out. Now, honor. He talked about honor. And he says, I quote, You students of the class of 2025, now listen to this, have been instructed in, have absorbed fully, and will pass on the code of honorable conduct that has become a natural part of who you are. Personal ethics, personal integrity. And when I would hire people, first thing I tried to do was find out and interview them, did they have personal integrity? And even if they were qualified and maybe could do the job, if they didn't have personal integrity, I would pass on them. And I would look for somebody with personal integrity because I could train them if necessary. And he says it's still going to remain with you on the long road ahead. Hillsdale has taught you not to worry. If you're not one with the current majority of youth, because you are certainly one with most of the past and the future generations. So don't get caught up in this woke society. Don't get caught up in all these trappings that the world would throw at us saying, oh yeah, you should do this. This is now. This is with the Cultural Revolution. We're more enlightened now than we were then. Now, he goes on to say, your confidence in your code of ethical comportment and personal standards will be your legacy to help guide future generations. Because your values are real, permanent, and ancient, you will not be won over by those who justify their lapses of behavior by situational ethics or feelings of victimization. Excuse me here. Then he talks about tradition. And there's much more to honor. I hope you read it. And he says, I quote, the characteristics of a Hillsdale student is nurtured and sustained by tradition. That's a word deprived from the Latin noun that's probably messed up a little bit, meaning a transmission or handing down. So often in the age of presentationism, we in our narcissism and arrogance confuse our technical and material success with automatic moral progress. We seem unaware that thinkers of the past, as early as back to the Greek area of 2,700 years ago, they worried about just the opposite. They were worried that material progress and greater wealth would result in moral regress. Given the greater opportunity to gratify the appetites with perceived fewer consequences and to use sophistication to excuse the sin. And isn't that what's happening? What's right is now called wrong. What's wrong is now called. We have situational ethics. We can do it's our truth, whatever it is. Just do whatever you want to do. And there's much more to this area of tradition. And now he ends with optimism. And he said, and I quote, I wish to end on a happy note. In the manner I first encountered the Hillsdale College community, your generation is now witness to a counter-revolution of thought. Millions of Americans are asking for a re-examination of our cultural and society with an eye to restoring ancient decency and looking to the good of our past generations. Does that sound a little different than what's happening? Think of all the colleges, all these colleges, and I talked about this in recent posts in the past. Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Columbia, all those were formed on the Bible principles and were teaching biblical principles. And Harvard was teaching pastors mainly to start with. So we need to return back to what the nation was founded on. And he goes on to say, critical to this restoration is your optimism. And he's speaking to us, you and me right now, not just this class of 2025. Optimism in the future. Such positivity is a child of gratitude for all we have inherited. Folks, are you grateful? I'm overwhelmed by how good God has been to me, even in the midst of my failures, my mistakes, stupidity. Oh my goodness. If I was God, I would wipe me off on the face of the earth and said, forget him. But God didn't. And he hasn't forgotten you either. So gratitude is important to all. that we have inherited, and all that wish to enhance and pass on to others not yet born. Now, isn't that what happened in the Old Testament? If you know anything about the Bible, the Jewish people were told by God, pass this laws down to your children, to your grandchildren. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have emails. They didn't have all this fancy communication stuff. They had to do it verbally. And for thousands of years, the Jewish families has passed down what they were given by God, what they were promised by God, how God has helped them in the past. And we have forgotten that in the Western world. We're too busy. We're too involved. Families sitting around the dinner table with two, three, or four kids. Everybody's on a cell phone, doing something, watching something, checking emails, or sending chats or snaps or Instagram. We should outlaw phones on the around the dinner table. With optimism and confidence in a civilization, it can grow rather than shrink. It can become secure, not depressed or beset by self-loathing. It looks to the future with reverence for the past rather than with shame or hate. We've got a work to do, folks. And it's going to start with you and I getting involved in our local communities at the school level, particularly if you have children in school, get involved. Find out what's going on. There are schools, we know executive orders and the president ordering DEI and CRT taken out. A lot of these schools have just renamed, repolished the things, called it something else, and trying to go on and get away with it. We need to expose them and root them out. So, ending here by Victor Davis Hanson. So you, the class of 2025, as Hillsdale graduates, will be asked by your peers to provide guidance as never before. And I'm confident by your education, your code of comportment, your reverence, and your optimism, you will become natural leaders and exemplars in whatever paths you follow. In the era to come, that will be America's greatest renaissance, and also, I think, its most decent. And he ended with God blessing on the students. This message is for you and me, not just for the graduating class. What will you do? Will you step out of the crowd and let your voice be heard, starting in your local community, raising concerns about what your city council might be doing or your school boards might be doing? Then get involved. Let your voice be heard. If necessary, run for office. There's been great inroads made in education boards across the country where citizens have risen up and recalled the board members for what they've been doing and put in righteous men and women who really believe in our Constitution and have faith in God to make sure our young people are taught the values that our nation was formed on and is today, and that we have a God that still loves us and he should be involved in our lives. I'd like your comments. Let me know what you think on any of the platform, or you can email me at pi777 at gmail.com. And would you like, subscribe, let your voice come forth? And if you have a problem in your life or business and you wonder, can a private eye help me? Send me a summary of what the situation is, and I'll get back to you and let you know if a PI can help. And that email is pi777 at gmail.com. I'm going to thank you. I'm expectant. I'm optimistic that you will take this message, find out more about it, and step out of the crowd and let your voice be heard. May God bless you. May God bless your family. And may God bless America. Be safe. Till next time.